So ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, comrades, a very good evening to you all and welcome to the October Gallery. Without doubt a unique cultural hub in central London for poets, writers, intellectuals, artists and the perfect location for tonight's event. Thank you for taking your time out to be part of this year's annual National Union of Journalists Black Members Council's Claudia Jones Lecture. My name is Tony Adams, Chair of the NUJ Black Members Council. And it is an honour and privilege to be with you here tonight as your host. And looking forward to hearing from our special invited guest speaker, Mr. Nels Abbey, writer, broadcaster and former banker. We gather here today to celebrate the remarkable life and enduring legacy of Claudia Jones, a titan in the world of journalism and a tireless champion for social justice. Claudia Jones was born in Trinidad in 1924, relocated to New York where she confronted the harsh realities of poverty and discrimination. In 1936 she became a member of the Young Communist League and joined the staff of the Daily Worker. In 1955 she faced arrest and served a year in prison before being deported, finding asylum in the UK. Arriving in the face of signs reading "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish," Claudia Jones emerged as a prominent leader in the emerging Black equal rights movement in London's Notting Hill. She went on to establish the West Indian Gazette, one of the UK's earliest black newspapers. In 1959 she played a pivotal role in founding the Notting Hill Carnival, which has grown to become the largest in Europe and stands as a fitting tribute to Claudia's life of activism and advocacy. Tragically, Claudia passed away in London on Christmas Day in 1964 and was laid to rest in the Highgate Cemetery, where she shares her final resting place next to Karl Marx. Claudia's journey through life was not just an ordinary one, it was a profound odyssey, marked by a fierce dedication to truth, a deep passion for storytelling, and an unwavering commitment to the cause of racial inequalities and human rights. As we reflect on Claudia Jones' extraordinary career and her indomitable spirit, we must recognise that she was not only merely a journalist, but a force of nature, a catalyst for change, and a beacon of hope for countless individuals who yearn for a better, more just world. Her work stands as a testament to the transformative power of the written word, and she fearlessly wielded her pen and her voice as instruments of enlightenment and transformation. Claudia Jones was more than a journalist, she was an activist who dared to challenge the status quo, a voice for those who had been silenced for far too long, a groundbreaking reporting unearthed hidden truths, exposed injustices, and a fearless advocacy and unyielding pursuit of justice. Claudia's legacy inspires us to continue to fight for a more inclusive, diverse, multicultural society, and her work has left an indelible mark on our world, reminding us that journalism, when wielded with integrity and purpose, can be an instrument of profound change. But Claudia was not content to merely document the struggles of the marginalised. She actively participated in the movement she covered. She marched alongside civil rights activists, she stood with the oppressed, and she called out systemic racism with a voice that resonated far and wide, in a world that often shied away from uncomfortable truths. Claudia Jones stood boldly in the face of adversity and never wavered in her commitment to speak truth to power. Claudia's life serves as a shining example of the enduring impact one person can make when driven by passion, conviction, and an unwavering dedication to justice. Let us remember her not for just her words, but for her actions and movements she inspired. Let her life be a call to action, a call to continue the vital work of dismantling the barriers of racism, discrimination and prejudice that continue to divide our society today. Tonight, we celebrate the 21st National Union of Journalists Black Members Council's Claudia Jones Lecture, and honour her conviction for her courage, truth and resilience, and the enduring impact she's had on our world. Thank you, Claudia, for your tireless dedication and your unwavering commitment to justice. Your legacy will forever be an inspiration and a guiding light in our ongoing journey towards a just and just equal society. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest speaker for the NUJ BMC 2023 Claudia Jones Lecture. a literary luminary who's been critically hailed as a national treasure, a maestro of wit with a symphonist of satire. When we think of authors, the image that often springs to mind is one of solitary souls hunched over typewriters in dimly lit rooms. But Nels Abbey is no ordinary author. He's more like a literary Jedi, wielding his words with the precision of a lightsaber and the charisma of Han Solo. Nels Abbey's book, Think Like a White Man, isn't just a book. It's a testament to his sharp wit, keen insight and unparalleled knack of dissecting social matters with a razor-sharp humour. But there's more to Nels than just clever wordplay. He possesses the remarkable ability to confront the elephant in the room, tackle the hard-hitting issues and leave audiences in stitches while ruminating on critical topics. He's the tightrope of social commentary. And of course, it is with great pleasure, without any further ado, let's extend our warmest welcome to the man of the moment, Mr. Nels Abbey.
Thank you so much, man. That was excessive. Thank you very much. Thank you. Before I say anything, I just wanted to dedicate this speech to two beautiful black boys, two beautiful black boys, one of whom never got to grow up to be a man, and the other one grew up to be a monster. And I just want to say the rest of you, and God bless your souls. Right, let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. So last year, on this very stage, you had Gary Young, the Gary Young. This year, you had me. So this, to me, is almost like, in terms of, I just want to manage your expectations. It's really and truly, it's probably the biggest downgrade that you've witnessed since Barack Obama gave power to Donald Trump. It's kind of like, to think of it, it's almost like Michael Jackson finishing performing, and he's just done Don't Blame It on the Sunshine, Blame It on the Boogie, Rock With You, I Can't Help It, What If We Start Something? Then you say, well, Michael Jackson, everybody. Coming next is Mario. Okay, so what's Mario going to do right now? So nonetheless, I'm going to do my very best. I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to do my best to outdo Gary once and for all, see what I can do. Thank you so much to the National Union of Black Members Council for inviting me here. I am truly grateful. I'm honoured. I'm absolutely blown away honoured. And to be frank, I'm operating under the assumption that you've actually never Googled my name. Because if you had, I refuse to believe I would be here, but we are where we are, so thank you so much. So let's get into this. How would Claudia Jones be described today? Claudia Jones would today be described as a rebel, a free and alternative thinker, someone who doesn't agree with or accept the consensus, an exception to the rule, and an even greater exception to the rulers. A teller of inconvenient truths, an anti-establishment figure, a fighter, an agitator, a rabble-rouser. Somebody who described as brave in that very English way. Like, it's very brave of you to say that. One who dares to be a Daniel. I'll go as far as say she would be described as a West Indian Gazette founding, Guardian reading, tofu eating, wokerati. But ladies and gentlemen, to the majority of us who gather here today, in this room, in her memory, we remember Claudia Jones with three simple words. One of us.
Yes.
The life of Claudia Jones was a life of successful boundary-pushing radicalism, a life of power and principles. And I go as far as saying that it was a life that was shaped in part by the struggle, by her career, of course, but it was also shaped by where she lived. Claudia she was not a tree, she moved. She was born in Trinidad and Tobago, moved to America, where she became, of course, a communist, a black communist, in a time where being a communist was used a communist, as in it was quite literally, I don't know what was worse at the time, being black or being a communist, but being a black communist was certainly the double Big Mac of the time. She was also a feminist, a black feminist. That's an important thing that we must remember in her memory too. I point out the fact that she was somebody who moved around, because I think it's important to her experience, to her exposure, and to her life, and to her life's work. Because she took things from everywhere she went to, starting off in Trinidad and Tobago, where she started life, moved to America, and ended up in the United where she found her forever, and we celebrate her forever this very evening in her gathering tonight, right here. I think that's really, really important. Because Claudia was made up, is pretty much a composition of a set of stories, of a set of experiences. And so are all of us. We're all a set of stories, we're all a set of experiences, we're all brought here together by virtue of the fact that things have happened to us, that we've experienced conflict, we've experienced good times, we've experienced bad times, we've experienced a lot of different things over the course of our lives that make our lives, make our times, punctuate where we are, and actually place us in a particular time and place. So I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to speak about my favourite subject for a couple of moments. And actually, for the best part of 10 minutes, I'm going to speak about my favourite subject, myself. I'm going to take a little bit of a journey as to how I arrived here and what we potentially learned from my experiences on the way or so. I don't really speak about myself too much or so, just to friends and family and anybody who will listen to me. So you fall under friends and family tonight. I will start off by elaborating on that beautiful intersection between, actually a very often undercovered intersection between African parenting and nuclear weapons. Bear with me, this is the honest statement. So I was born in the early 80s in the English country. I was born in Paddington, St Mary's, same hospital as much of the royal family, for anybody who wants to question my Britishness or so. I'm British as it gets. But I was fostered before I knew my left from my right, before I knew anything. I was a foster kid. And I grew up in one of the whitest places on earth. I have actually never been in a room that anybody can actually know, where I've ever met anybody who's actually been to this place. So we'll test it tonight. Put your hands up if you've been to, not you at the back. Put your hands up if you've been to a place called Benson. I've never been in a room where anybody, you can put your hands up, that's my big sister in the back. So, that was my first black friend or so. That's my big sister. We were the only two black people who I think had ever visited Benson at that time. It was a very, very rural place. Our biggest worries growing up for the first few years of our lives were not, it was not essentially racism, but it was actually just running from bulls and making sure we weren't chased by bulls so you couldn't go red when you went out or so, because there was farmlands there and everything else. This was a really, really white place. It was something really, really unique. So we grew up there. We had white foster parents, German foster mum, Scottish foster dad. They were absolutely lovely. No horror stories there whatsoever. No horror stories. And I would often say to people that growing up in Benton, we also moved to Rugby and then to Derby, so you probably heard those places. Yeah, look at them nodding their heads and say, you know you're England. So we moved to those places too. And the thing I'll say about living in the countryside growing up is that we were very, very English children. I didn't identify as Nigerian. Of course, I didn't know much about being Nigerian at the time. I certainly didn't identify as British Nigerian. I didn't even identify as British. I was an English child and everything that entailed. Kind of like David Lammy today. Yeah? How David Lammy has to think of himself today. What's up with that guy? Anyway, so I was very, very much an English child. And we were wholesome English children. We were the type of children who would write into Jim Will Fix It. I was a member of the Roast Cartoon Club. I was never invited to the studios, and I thank God for that. I'm not going to go to the show. But at the age of 9 or so, my sister and my siblings and I were taken back from our foster parents quite abruptly. One of the great things about us, we spend our summer holidays with our mum in London. It was a beautiful thing. And we often knew that London was very, very different to the countryside. There were these people you call black people in London. There wasn't any of that in the countryside. And when I was about 9, this was 1989, our mum just took us back abruptly. It was all quite all of a sudden. And we never got to speak to our foster parents again. It was all quite fairly traumatic stuff, but that happens. So, in leaving foster care, leaving the all-white countryside, I was really a bit hurt. I was devastated. I'd miss all my friends. I'd miss everything. But the one thing I was happy about was that I would no longer be that only black child. That when you see the actual school pictures or so, and you just see 2 black dots, that was me and her. And so it's kind of like a massive school picture. You just see 2. Who are those kids? And we always stood out, and that was us. And I just love the fact that going to my first day in my new school in London, which was one of the worst schools in London, actually one of the worst schools in the United Kingdom, you can actually look it up. It's actually called St. Peter's. Our head teacher was a 24-year-old, and she won the Pride of Britain Award for turning the school around. And getting to school the first day, and it was a class full of predominantly black kids. And it was something really amazing. And I really felt so happy that I am not going to be a minority anymore. We are all black here. This is good. Finally, I can just be, I don't have to go to the extra measures to fit in or anything else, so I don't have to debase myself. We are black. This is good. I really felt at home. Then on like day 2 or day 3, I heard some Nigerian kid getting roasted, and the other kids were just really just making so much fun of him. And I thought, hold on, but I'm Nigerian. And I thought, but what's wrong with being Nigerian? But then it turned out the problem wasn't him being Nigerian, it was him being African. And it turned out all the kids were just making so much fun of him because he was African. I was like, hold on, so being African is different from being, and it dawned on me that there's massive differences in black people. And so you had me, my name is Nels Abbey or so, and my surname's Abbey. It's not that hard to code switch or so, though. We had the English sounding surname or so. So I became Bayesian overnight. I became from Barbados, and I just abandoned the whole Nigerian stuff. So I just became like, hey, I am not anything to. I was roasting the African kids myself too. It was pretty harsh stuff to see. It was pretty harsh stuff to do too. But I became that because I just didn't want to stand out. I wanted to fit in. I thought it was somewhat important to just fit in. Anyway, being Bayesian for a little bit of time was worked out, and I think some of my friends, later on I found out some of my friends too, who were doing the roasting themselves too. The people I saw doing the roasting were actually Nigerian, Ghanaian kids themselves too, and but it got me into a lot of trouble because I had a lot of stereotypes of, say, how Caribbean people were meant to act in my head. And it kind of got me into some trouble because it was kind of stupid stuff, and we were all just egging each other on. And this is where nuclear weapons come on board, because people don't really associate African parenting with nuclear weapons. But every African parent you've met, I think every Caribbean parent too, maybe every Desi parent too, has a nuclear weapon at its disposal. It's called the old country. So my mum had this brilliant idea. I thought, so okay, he's misbehaving, he's not listening, we don't want the kids to end up on the streets, we don't want another. My mum put me on a one-way flight to Lagos. And it was the scariest stuff I'd ever experienced in my life. I'd never been on a plane. But then getting to Lagos, actually got into Cotonou first, which is actually in a place right beside Lagos, because it was Hamatan, which means there's a lot of dust in the air in that season, so they couldn't really fly through it. And it's quite a bizarre experience too, because they just left the plane door open and left us on the tarmac. And so I just went for a walk at one point, and I just saw that the plane door was open, and I stuck my head out, and this lady just grabs me. I said, "Oh, don't do that." And then she took me to the lovely. I said, "Oh, I didn't know there was anything wrong." She just took me to a place with all the Cokes and Sprites and everything, so you can have whatever you want from here. She was so nice to me. And I just saw some Nigerian kid did the same thing. She just slapped this kid's face or so. And he was speaking with a Nigerian accent. I thought, wow, that's pretty wild or so. But I realized, okay, she's treating him differently because he's speaking with a particular accent. Anyway, get to Nigeria about 7-8 hours after being on the tarmac, which is one of the craziest, hottest experiences of my life. Get to Nigeria, I meet my dad for the first time. My dad was a very, very worldly man, brilliant man. He had money. He was, unlike my mum, also mum was a cleaner at the BBC. My dad was a well-to-do man in Lagos. He was a bit of a playboy, still in his early 40s at the time, drove a Mercedes. He lived in a nice area, had a massive house, had maids, had everything. So my standard of living actually improved. So I was quite happy when I actually got there. And I met my friends down the road. My dad introduced me to some local kids. And it was just like nice, like, hey, okay. The one thing I was so happy about was that we were all Nigerian. There was no difference. I wouldn't have to do anything to fit in again. I could just be myself. No more faking, no more being a fake Jamaican or fake, nothing, just be his damn self. So I met some kids down the road, and they were lovely kids or so. One of them went on to become a major international fraudster. And, and it was really, actually really did. It's quite a bizarre story to get to. And it was really interesting stuff, just meeting different people. And they were really lovely to me. And then my standard of living had gone up so much to the point where I had a doorbell in my bedroom. I had this massive double bed. I used to share my bed with my brothers and sisters before, but like in my bedroom. I had a doorbell and a massive double king-size bed with edges on it and all sorts of other bits and bobs. So, and I could press the doorbell and the house, what they call a house girl would come along or so, and they'll bring me, I'll just say, "Can you bring me a Fanta," or something else like that. And then I'll press the doorbell again, I'll say, "Can you bring me a champagne glass?" And then I'll do that because I wanted to do the Will Smith thing, because like, yeah, I was drinking orange juice, have champagne. I didn't have orange juice, but I had Fanta. And then my dad was looking at me, and my dad decided that, okay, I need to go to a boarding school. And he sent me to the same boarding school as him. which was an established boarding school in a place that he described as the city of Abeokuta. And I thought to myself, wow, so Lagos is just Lagos, but the city of Abeokuta sounds like Miami. It sounds like, you know, it sounds something exotic, sounds like advanced. It may have been a city 1,000 years ago, but it was not a city anymore. This was a very rundown. It was like they often say that there's the Africa you see and there's the Africa you don't see. Lagos, is the Africa you don't see on TV. So many parts of really, really well-to-do with Lagos. Abeokuta was the Africa you do see on TV, quite literally. So I'm getting to boarding school after pretty much, I'll narrow it down by saying this, I pretty much might be the only person on earth who went from donating to Band-Aid to actually needing Band-Aid. It was really, really, really messed up. So the school was tough, harsh discipline, strong stuff or so. But the one thing I always held dear to my heart was that I just was normal. I just fitted in. I was just a Nigerian kid, like the rest of them. Then when I got to school, some people started asking, what tribe are you from? And I had no idea. I knew that I was Shikiri, but I didn't know it was a big deal. Then they explained to me that there's actually, Nigeria's got loads of different tribes. Actually, got 371. And most people have only ever heard of Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo people. And so when they asked me that, I just told one guy that I'm Shikiri, and they said to me, well, I've never heard of that before, where is that? And then another guy just came along and started to really just show off a little bit. And it quickly dawned on me, like, hold on 1 second, I'm back to being a fucking minority. And they explained to me that like Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo people are up here, and Shikiri people are somewhere beneath the floor in terms of you actually writing down a list. And so, again, my surname really served me well. Because Abbey sounds a bit like a Yoruba surname, so I just became a Yoruba person after the time. So that was my however many identity switches or so. I just said, hey, I'm a Yoruba elf from Lagos, and that was that. And it was all going messed uply, but we held it down. It was all very interesting. The Nigerian kids were brilliant. They were utterly brilliant beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Academically, I'd never experienced. I'd never struggled before. I'd never really been in too much competition with people, even when I was in the countryside and did it. But the Nigerian kids were mopping the damn floor with me. It was something very, very serious. It was actually quite a big blow to my self-esteem. But anyway, I caught up with them. I did okay for myself. But what was then interesting, after a bit of time, I started to learn a little bit more about Nigerian society. And you started to see the remnants of colonialism through my school in particular. For example, English was, of course, the first language, but to speak any language other than English would end up with you being caned. And it was very, very serious, getting punished. Some of the punishments were quite reminiscent of what you would see in slavery. Some of the caning or some of the corporal punishments were fairly vicious stuff. But it is what it is. Nigeria at the time was run by this gentleman, a particular man called General Babangida, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, very intelligent man. So Nigeria was a dictatorship at the time. And so Babangida was this, I knew one of his sons. He was a very, very smart man. He was clearly knew what he was doing because, again, Nigeria was cobbled together. It wasn't a real nation, it still really isn't. If you go back in time, Nigeria was cobbled together by the Brits about 100 years ago. And there was about, as I said before, there's about 371 different nations within what we call Nigeria today. They'll often describe them as tribes, but of course a tribe is a colonial construct. If you look at it, for some bizarre reason, Yoruba people, which amount to about 70 to 80 million in number or so, are called a tribe, whereas Scots, who are about 6 million at stretch, are a nation. So it's just colonial language. And you ask people to say the word tribe in their native language, they can't because it doesn't really exist. It's an English term. It's an English term. It's an English colonial term that was imposed upon the Africans and has been accepted a bit too much without questioning. But what was interesting about this Babangida guy was that he was he ran Nigeria almost like the Brits ran Nigeria to a certain degree. It was almost like a continuation of the colonial legacy, that he knew he was presiding over very, very many different types of people, and he had to keep them all in check to keep this nation in order. So Britain, just to be clear, in terms of the British Empire, Nigeria is one of the three great amalgamations. By that I mean what the Brits call amalgamation. They always come up with these bamboozling terms. One of these three great cobbling together of nations or so. The other two were, of course, India, which is split up, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or so, and the other one was Sudan, which is now north from Sudan, and southern Sudan, I beg your pardon, Sudan. But Nigeria is the last real big British creation state standing. And it was held together almost exclusively by the military at the time. Everybody was held together, but it wasn't an easy, it wasn't a fair or a good situation, but it worked at that particular time. It worked, it was very, Nigeria had a, particularly if you're in the richer parts of Australia, you had a very decent standard of living, things were stable, kids were going to school, the kids were academically bright, the future was good. And then around early 2000, 1993, I was speaking to my dad one day, there was one particular man on television, and his name was MKO Abiola, and he was running for an election. And it wasn't my dad specifically said to me that I wouldn't pay too much attention to politics as a job. Your job is to go out there and make money. Politics just assists you to do that. And then that was his perspective on it. I have a very different perspective on it. And my dad had this very, very unique way of just seeing things before they happen. But this time around, he just did it. And so Babangida, to put it in context, was a Hausa man. He was a Hausa general. And I think the best way to describe the Nigerian military, who are the bedrock of Nigerian politics, the best description I've ever heard of them is that they are intellectually hollow, but criminally masterminds. They're geniuses. And they really are. So it's something quite interesting. And then what happened that was that Babangida called an election. And my dad said to me, and he called it for 12th of June 1993. And I specifically said to my dad, I asked him, what do you think of this? Because it was pretty clear who was going to win because he had so much money or so. And my dad said to me, this Encho Abiola guy is going to win it or so, but I wouldn't invest too much in elections in Nigeria or so because they're often just bullshit. And he said, I'm sorry for swearing, guys, I don't know if I'm allowed to or so, but yeah, he said that it's not too much to really worry about or anything else, just ignore it. And I didn't think that much of it because he said so. The election arrived on the 12th of June 1993, and then the 14th or the 15th of June, as the results were about to be announced, Babangida just cancelled the election. And I was in my school, actually, Abiola and my father both happened to have gone to my same school as me, and we didn't think much of it, the school didn't think much of it also. Nobody knew how the Nigerian population was going to react. All hell broke loose. It went absolutely insane. That I went from being in the most peaceful of places where all I had to worry about was bulls, about not a few years beforehand in Benson, to being one of the blackest, actually the blackest place on earth, in the middle of a riot where police are firing tear gas and rubber bullets and everything else. And I was just a 12-year-old boy at the time, a 12-year-old English boy, also I thought to myself at the time. And things went very, very, very insane, very, very quickly. I say this to say, I've told you all this for a particular purpose. I tend to tell you one joke that my dad used to say, but I'll come back to that. So my dad used to love messing, because the people who came from the really, really big ethnic groups, my dad used to love messing with them mentally. So, and he always had this one joke, and he would always say to his Igbo friends in particular, who he would do business with, and I don't think it was his joke, but he just loved repeating it, just looking in the eye. And he would say that there's a Yoruba man, a Hausa man, and an Igbo man, and they've all gone to the government for a contract. And the Hausa man walks in there and says, hey, listen, I'll do this contract for 30 grand. I'll build the road for 30 grand. And the government says to the guy, well, break it down for us. He said, I'll spend 10 grand on labour, 10 grand on profits or so, 10 grand on raw materials. And the Yoruba man walks in and says, I'll do it for 60 grand. And they say, okay, break it down for us. And the guy says, I'll spend 20 grand on labour, 20 grand on raw materials, and 20 grand profit for myself. And then in walks the Igbo man, who my dad never liked Igbo people for some bizarre reason. It was quite like a phobia of his. And he said, the Igbo man walks in and said he'll do it for 90 grand. And the government says, but the Hausa man said he'll do it for 30 grand. And the Igbo man said, yeah, they asked the Igbo man to break it down. And the Igbo man says, I'll spend 30 grand for me, 30 grand for you, and 30 grand for the Hausa man to do the actual job. And my dad used to love telling them, I just found it so bigoted. But my dad used to love just looking his Igbo friends or Igbo business partners in the eye to say it. And one of them said to him, why are you telling me this joke? And then my dad says, so when you tried to defraud me or so, you will know in the back of your mind I saw you coming. And I thought, well, that guy's never going to like you. It doesn't matter if he likes me or so. What matters is that he does good business with me, he knows I'm not to mess with. I used to think of it as quite funny. Anyway, the riot happens, but I'm saying this to say this, right, and then we'll get back to where we are, is that the riot happens, Nigeria goes into full, absolute collapse. And as I said before, the man who won the election was a man called MK Abiola. He was an interesting guy. No one really knew, I can't see people knew that much about him, they just knew he was rich. But he became like a Nigerian Obama, without the hope and change or change you can believe or all that sort of stuff, or yes we can. He just knew that this guy was just rich and he was giving people rice and all that, whatever. So he was a rich man. People just believed that his wealth would trickle down on them. Does that sound familiar to you guys? And that was the guy. So he didn't lose the election, he won the election, but the military stepped in and just annulled the election. But the military still knew that they had to keep this ethnically diverse nation together. So when Babangida decided to leave office in August 1993, and he just picked some random Yoruba man called Ernest Shonekan and put him in power. Ernest Shonekan was a civilian and a Yoruba man himself. So Babangida, in my view, was playing identity politics a little bit. And he just said he was always saying to Nigerian people that yes, what he wanted was a Yoruba businessman to be in charge. And I've given you that, and now I'm, as he put it, stepping aside. And that was that. Of course, what happened in that moment with Ernest Shonekan was a very, very inconsequential figure now in Nigerian history, is what I think we're experiencing a little bit in Britain today. That, I know it's a long-winded way to get to this point, but what's interesting now is that for the longest time, what we asked for, what we sought, what we begged for, prayed for, petitioned for, demonstrated for, did everything for, so was a certain degree of diversity. In higher levels of media, of course, but more importantly to this conversation, in the higher levels of government. What happened with Ernest Shonekan is what's happening now in Britain. That we asked for what we prayed for, what we asked for, we begged for, we prayed for, we petitioned for, so was given to us. But it was given to us almost as a means of facilitating our worst nightmares coming true. That with Ernest Shonekan, they surrounded him pretty much by the military, some very, very aggressive soldiers or so. One of them was called General Abacha, who just overthrew him 4 months later on, and Nigeria went into its darkest moments ever. And I lived through all those darkest moments too. But what was interesting is the same thing I believe we're seeing over here right now in Britain, is something I'm very deeply concerned about. That in the name of diversity, which is a virtue, a very good thing for us to have, we're experiencing or living under an increasingly far-right government. And in the name of diversity, once again too, as journalists, as writers or so, we're not questioning it anywhere near as strongly as we should be doing. And I think that this is a very, very dangerous time we find ourselves in, particularly, I'll say, what might potentially could happen on Saturday, or what's been going to happen on Saturday. I think that these are moments in our time, in our history also, as British people, particularly as British ethnic minorities, that we have to be super careful about and super vigilant about. And I think us as writers and journalists also have a responsibility to really document not just what has happened, how we got here, and how potentially we can get out of this situation too. We prayed or asked for diversity, we end up getting diversity-drenched bigotry, institutionalized at the state level. That today we find ourselves in a situation where the Nigerian elite, the Nigerian elite essentially ran Nigeria like the Brits ran Nigeria. They plundered it. They took what they wanted to say was that they inflamed tensions. They far too frequently favored collaborators over talent or so. Identity took more of a precedence over things such as things such as competence. Journalists were bullied. There's a journalist inside here right now who I can name or so, who I saw up front personally bullied by a government minister. Bullied, some of them might find themselves in even worse situations. The economy became increasingly less important. Security was compromised. minorities in particular were disregarded. Do these things sound familiar to you? Essentially, the Nigerian elite were running Nigeria like the Brits were doing. Sadly today, Britain is running Britain like it would have done one of its colonies in the past. And I think that is seeping through much of our society, and it's something that I think that we all need to be on our toes about to make sure that we're really, truly telling these stories and getting the word out there. The seductive nature of statistics speak for themselves, because if you take a look at today, right now, we have the most diverse government we've ever had in our history. And the stats look glorious. The stats paint us as a progressive nation. The stats are deceptive. The stats tell only part of the story, and sometimes the stats can actually distort the story. And I feel that's what's happening with us right now. Looking at the raw stats, you're massively encouraged. We see in the statistics, or those of us come from minority ethnic backgrounds, so we seem more powerful than we've ever seen before. But the reality is that it's never been more perilous. That if you listen to far-right, respectable far-right figures or so, not just the knuckle-dragging thug or so, or something else like that, you clothe yourself in football gear, but the ones who wear the suit and tie and go to eat and all those sorts of places, repatriations is increasingly on their tongue. If you listen to them also, and they feel increasingly boldened because they know it's increasingly within their realm of achievability. Something that was once completely inconceivable. And I must point out too, increasingly as I often say, where there's oppression, there is always, of course, collaboration. And where there's collaboration, of course, there is privilege, power, prestige, power sterling, and great portrayal. The collaborator, the person who stands alongside the oppressor also will be the person, or will be the person who's most favoured by the oppressor. And I got that sentence out pretty poorly, but I take it again rightly. Nowhere, I thought I knew Britain, and I thought I knew where we were, particularly as far as British media is concerned. I've been on the receipt, I've seen some really, really dark stuff done within our media, some stuff that's actually unspeakable. I've worked at a fairly senior level within Pins in the Mountaintop. I've seen all sorts of bits and bobs. But I never knew that things such as racism laundering would be so explicit in British media, to the point that today, the most prolific writer of black issues in Britain, is a 60-something-year-old white male who writes a lot of cultural articles, and then they actually place them in the name of black and brown culture warriors or so. And this was only revealed because the actual culture warrior in question, who revealed it, thought it was normal. She thought it was normal that she would be asked to be the face of racist articles or so, and therefore get paid to not write an article, but to actually just be the face of it. And the mute nature of the response for some of media suggested that she may well have been onto something. That it took quite a lot to get the story out there too. So I'm not a reporter. My job I write a lot of time, I write comments and opinion pieces or so. So my job, if I was to define it or so, is not to actually break that. I'm not the Dean White or or so many of my betters who are in this room today, Lester Holloway, etc. I don't beat the pavement or so, I beat the laptop. Once you guys have beat the pavement, I come along, make the story a little bit bigger or so, or try and give it a little bit more, and give it a bit more shine or so, and that's pretty much my job. And to actually get the story reported, to persuade the people who beat the pavement to actually get the story reported was actually very, very difficult to do. Actually, it was largely ignored. So it's something I worry about once again too. But it goes beyond tabloids, of course. The tabloids are always the low-hanging fruit when it comes to malpractice. When it comes to malpractice, particularly malpractice in race or malpractice in diversity in media or so, we see it across the board. Some of the biggest names in media are do some very dubious things that I won't go into too much detail on today, but we've seen lots of diversity schemes or so, and some of them haven't actually resulted in the things they should have resulted in, haven't resulted in the change they should have resulted in. And I don't think that is an accident, because I don't think that some of these schemes were designed to work. I think they're designed to fail, and they end up failing the people actually who are good-natured or naive enough to actually go on them. So here we are today in Britain. In today's Britain, there's only two routes. When you look at politics in today's Britain, there's perhaps only two routes that I can think of to become potential prime ministerial material so Britain. And one is underwriting people's jobs and giving away billions and billions and billions of pounds during a pandemic, or once in a lifetime, or once in a 3 or 4 lifetime pandemic or so, and the other is pretty much pandering to racism and inflaming this nation or so and saying what you know people want to hear. I'm not going to say anything about Suella Braverman tonight. But I will say this. Today's far-right-wing Twitter warrior is tomorrow's potential Prime Minister. And it's something you have to take very, very seriously. If you look at what's going on right now, if you just look at it, I've actually seen 2 people who spent a lot of their time trolling me on Twitter have now become Tory candidates in safe seats, essentially, very, very winnable seats. And it says something that's quite scary to me. So overall, and I think that there is something a bit deeper about this too, and it goes back to what I was saying about when I was young, that need to fit in. That need to actually want to just be part of something, not want to be the minority, not wanted to be the outsider, not wanted to be somebody who's different. And I think that's a powerful feeling to want to fit in. But I think sometimes too, for us, those of us who come from minority backgrounds or so, we know what people want to hear from us. We know sometimes what people want us to potentially do or potentially say, or how they want us to potentially perform. So, but we always have to have that responsibility to make sure we know how what we say and what we do or so is going to impact people like us. Also, because it's very, very temporary or so in terms of the love you might get out of it, so it's very fleeting. And that's why you're going to see that people are going to have to go to increasingly extreme positions in order to actually attain the love that they're trying to get, or the love or the position or the power or the portrayal or the power stone or whatever it might be. And it's a very dark situation that places us in. So, here we are. And we have a media that is somewhat, if you take a look right now, our government is very aggressive against media, particularly against journalists. Journalists can sometimes be bullied, sometimes journalists can be sacked, or sometimes if somebody says the wrong thing about the actual government or so, we'll find that some journalists or some publications go out of their way to destroy that person for having a position, and then they'll turn around and scream about free speech in the same, at the end of the other breath. So I think as minorities and minorities who work in media, minorities who write or journalists or whatever we do also, it's a very, very perilous time for us in particular, but it's also a very, very important time. And for the work that you all do, and for everything that for the sacrifices you make, the risks that you take on our behalf, the stories that you tell, I don't stand here today as your equal. I stand here today as your appreciator, for somebody who really appreciates the work that you guys do. I plead upon you to continue to remain vigilant, that we continue to work together, that we continue to actually try and help each other. We do things in the spirit of Claudia Jones. She was somebody who stood against the tide, as it was necessary to stand against the tide, and she did so well. And I continue to plead that you continue to do what you're doing right now. So absolutely, thank you very much.